Well, good evening, everybody. This is your host, Mason Sims, and thank you for tuning in to another episode tonight. Joining us this evening is Miss Lauren Martel. She is from Beaufort, South Carolina, and she is an attorney there. And we actually had her about a couple months ago, so we're going to continue the interview from last time since we had some technical difficulties. And we'll also be talking about the state convention as well, since that's going to be coming up not this Saturday, but next Saturday. So again, my name is Mason Sims, and let's get started. Well, good evening, everybody. And Lauren, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's always wonderful to be on your show.
Absolutely. Yeah, I enjoyed having you on a couple months ago, and I know we had some technical difficulties, and I had a lot of people reach out that said they really wish that we could have finished the interview. So I'm glad we're able to get all that straightened out and finish what we started last time.
Yep, that sounds great. I think it was on my part, and I think my phone sort of overheated. Whatever we were talking about must have been really spicy because my phone just overheated and the temperature light came on, and we had to just break. So I apologize for that, but thanks for inviting me back.
Absolutely, yeah. I had that like one of my first episodes I did. I think maybe the battery was running low, or I think I just charged my phone, then started it and it overheated. So yeah, it's okay. But yeah, definitely, I'm sure you're frustrated by that.
Well, it's always nice to have another opportunity. Take two, in this day and age. And there's always something new that crops up that we can talk about too. In between the time, so much has happened, right? I mean, a lot of interesting things that we both have participated in, and how we've been watching politics in our great state of South Carolina. And a lot of it is just, the front row seat is, I mean, it's incredible. You almost can't make it up, with recently what's been going on with our great state treasurer, and how the legislature is trying to pull a fast one in the Senate, and that vote was caused a lot of eyes to all watch our South Carolina Senate. Right? I mean, that was really intense, and so we're a great state, but we're kind of messing up, I think, from a due process and a basic constitutional civics class. I think we're not doing so well in that. That's what my takeaway is from watching most recently over the last couple of months since you and I talked.
Oh yeah, and South Carolina, it's technically known as a Republican state, but it's heavily divided, and
Yeah,
just
people
some.
keep talking about purple, but um, it's very blue. I think. I mean, in some ways, I would call it. Keith Blanford's always talking about the uniparty, or some of the people are talking about, it's not necessarily the two-party system that we see, because a lot of times perception isn't reality, and there's a lot of illusions in politics. You and I both know that. And so people can say they're Republican or say they're Democrat, and that causes a lot of a divide. And a lot of times the politicians like that division, and I think it really boils down to what I've been seeing over the last few years is that it's Americans, or let's say South Carolinians, versus sort of a globalist agenda that is more of a corporate globalist agenda that isn't really our constitutional republic, but more of a globalist. Like I said, really corporatism is what comes to mind when I'm watching how our politics is so influenced, and that's been a problem. I think it's a problem.
Absolutely, yeah, we definitely have been having a lot of problems here lately. So yeah, hopefully we get the right people in there to at least tackle on the issue so we can find a solution.
Well, one of the things that I think is really interesting that happened between the last time you and I talked was that Donald Trump came out with an executive order. And one of the particular issues I think is a singular issue that he has always grabbed onto, and this executive order dealt with, was election integrity. And he's really been very clear that he believes that these machines, and then now even Tulsi Gabbard and some of the people who have been investigating the vulnerabilities of these machines, are a problem, and could not they may not necessarily be um, verified as far as being able to do elections that aren't necessarily hackable or vulnerable to outside influence, and particularly when they're owned by foreign stakeholders. So his executive order really comes in that we should have 1 day voting, and that we should have a paper ballot trail that is audible, that you can audit, and that wouldn't get caught up in semantics as far as if it would have personally identifying information. It shouldn't. The paper trail should be able to just be counted properly without personally identifying information, because it's a fundamental constitutional right that we cast our votes in secret, but that we can count in public. And that's not happening in South Carolina right now. That's absolutely not happening. And what I'm seeing in my precinct reorganization, and the way the Republican Party, as far as the establishment that wants to maintain the incumbent, who's Drew McKissick was fired from RNC and has been in very long. I mean, when we all conservatives say term limits, but he's been in very long. He's been a gatekeeper. And when I say gatekeeper, absolutely not transparent with any of the finances. There's a big question with the
Right.
South Carolina ethics right now as to whether or not they should be filing quarterly returns, and county level, the county level Republican Party is filing, quarterlies. And I think I've said this before to
There's
you.
and there's been reports too, like he makes like a 7 figure salary. That's at least what I've heard from several sources.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Right. And a membership, it's my understanding of the way it's created is it's an unincorporated association, but it has a membership, and there is sort of a fiduciary duty to the membership to be somewhat financially transparent. I mean, even a GOP chair out of California said that, fiscal responsibility and financial transparency to the membership is top tier duty to do that. And just, that's one of the things, especially with Doge around, right? Everybody's saying, wow, you know, look at what they were able to find with just a little bit of digging. Well, the gatekeepers, like I said, they don't let anybody see any of the information, and they sort of pass the baton on to people who are also going to be gatekeepers. And that's what I witnessed at my local county convention for the reorganization of the Republican Party. And that was that the people who are in power right now are very subversive. They're going to say that they support Donald Trump, but they're very subversive to what I just described as his most recent executive order on election integrity. So the people who are in charge of the Beaufort County Republican Party, which is where my county is, they wrote the law that was passed. It speed tracked and got passed in the South Carolina legislature in 2022, right before the primary, and is a lady by the name of Xiaodan Li, who basically wrote the law using her um, entity called Friends for Liberty out of Beaufort County, but she's also the executive committee person, and then Kevin Henley. And they really are proud of that law, but that law keeps the machines. And what I noticed, I wonder just why, you have to have 4 armed guards at a county convention for a Republican Party. I've been in this for a little while, and in the beginning, it was never like that. I mean, at a county convention
Was
for a Republican Party, having armed guards
that
would have been unheard of, right?
the National Guard?
No, no, they were just armed security guards but they had their Glock right here, ready to go. And
Yeah, we had the sheriff's office. Several people from the Pickens County Sheriff's Office at our county convention too.
right, and yeah, I'll get into a little bit more of how intimidating that was. I mean, they were very nice, and smiled at them, and but if once somebody went down to do a normal Robert's Rules point of order, and then the gavel was banged by the chair or the vice chair, and saying you're out of order, you're out of order. All they had to do was say you're out of order twice and overtalk the person who's just trying to make a reasonable, logical point of order, and the armed guards started coming down towards them, towards the person who was making the point of order. Extremely intimidating, and absolutely shutting down any sort of civil debate and freedom of speech. But so my next question was like, why are they gatekeeping so hard? You know, but
Yeah,
as you and I both know, these voting machines are multi-million dollars. A lot of money goes into them. The budget pays for them and they keep the election machine that we have here, mechanisms that keep the machines, let's just call that, it's very expensive. And, government is always looking for more money, more money. And um, so I believe the reason why they have to have a communist style shutting down of civil debate, they have to make sure that they rig it so that the America First delegates don't get in. And they do that by on the official ballot, they uh, endorsed and they picked all the numbers for the people that they wanted to have as the delegates and the alternates. And then they called people in advance, and they had the local politician who was the speaker at the convention endorse those delegates. And then they put a little box on the top of the official ballot, and they said, if you just check that one box, that's all you have to do. And so the other qualified, state delegates, candidates like myself and other people that they didn't want weren't in that box that they were suggesting. And they rushed people sort of in, and they had the vote right away. They never had anybody who was a state candidate at the county convention for state delegate. They never had anybody introduce themselves or stand up or, have a bio. So a lot of the new people or the people that they just brought in didn't know the protocol. And with the politician recommending and endorsing their slate, and them having their slate on the official ballot, whereas everybody else was sort of over to the side, and then making
Was
it
the
easy.
was the voting, as far as voting for the state delegates, was it the same as last convention, or is this completely different? Do you have like a completely different set of state delegates that are going to Columbia next Saturday?
Yes, it was completely different. And it was the way they voted last time in 2023 when I became, I was the top alternate. Um, they had it where you individually circled everybody. Like everybody was on the same sheet of paper and equally spread out. And you had to individually pick each person. Here, they made it super easy for like some of these older people in Beaufort. A lot of Sun City people and they basically just made it, just check this. They were telling them what to do. Check this one box. These are the people we want to go to the state convention. And they were all going to be people that were going to vote for Drew McKissick, we believe. And so why did they want to control that so much so that they rigged that county convention? My belief is that the executive committee person, Shadian Lee, who drafted the law that keeps the machines, the voting machines, is telling everybody regularly and calling people and telling them the machines are safe and that there is a paper trail for the machines. Well,
Right.
that's not really true, but she's misrepresenting that, and that's subversive. So, do you see what I'm saying, though? Is when she gets people who she can control, she's going to also then be able to elect people in the legislature who will then vote for the machines. And they don't want to
And
get rid of the machine.
she is this your new elected chairman for the Beaufort County Republican Party?
She has been there for the last few terms. I think she's been in there for 6 years.
Oh
So
wow, yeah, that's a
yeah,
long time.
she's got a real stronghold here. And so when we were going through even the precinct reorganization, that was when Drew and Kevin Henley and Xiaodan Lee, they called in all of the people who are already elected officials. And I have a memorandum. I think I sent it to you, but as part of it, I've attached, the Kevin Henley email and also the Drew McKissick email. And that was where they put a call to all the elected officials saying, if you want to keep your positions, you need to get involved in reorg. So, for example, in my local precinct reorg, our local sheriff was there, and he became a delegate to the county convention, and he is our sheriff, and he was sitting in the back of our precinct reorg, with arms crossed and a bit intimidating. And they even tried to get in some judges and the solicitor. Now, the solicitor and one of the judges that I know declined to be involved in precinct reorganization, and weren't even very familiar with it, to be honest. But I mean, obviously, a judge getting involved in Republican, um, politics at that local level isn't an appropriate look. But that's what I'm telling you is they basically were saying to the elected officials, the clerk of court did get involved. She was there in her precinct, and they just came because these people who have been in there for 6 or 10, 8 years, they're calling these elected officials get involved in the precinct reorganization. So you can see how difficult it was for the America First people in some of these counties to um, get a slate and to win a slate. And that I don't even really like slates, to be honest. I mean, they were working for a while, but they're kind of the situation that it's you know if you don't have the numbers, you're never going to win. So it's better to try to have some individuals get in, I think, than
Right.
just the slates.
And I noticed too, but you probably have been informed, the Pickens GOP, that at least for this past term, the America First leadership there, I mean, they were basically doing the same thing as the establishment was doing, saying you're going to vote for this person for city council or state representatives. That's who you say you're going to vote for, and basically like thinking people can't think for themselves. So and that's kind of how it was at this county convention too. Like I won a couple of years ago. I won easily to the state convention, and I pretty much voted every single way that my colleagues voted. But based on like one or two decisions I made that this America First group didn't like, they ousted me. I mean, I was passing
Mhm.
around business cards advertising for state legislature. Said, I'm not voting for you. I mean, it's
Yeah.
pretty hysterical. I mean, because my voting record proves otherwise what my beliefs are. So it's just amazing how controlling and divided our county and state GOPs have become.
Yes, and part of that I think is just by design, because that's what happened in the 2023 state convention, and I think something similar might happen this time around. The bottom line is that the party system as it is right now is not serving the America First agenda, and it's not serving the actual Republican creed and the Republican platform, and it's counterfeit. It's been hijacked. I mean, normal Republican platform is never going to have armed guards and shutting down somebody's normal civil debate. I get hecklers or whatever, and some people do have to get hauled off, but we are not in communist China. And, people shouldn't be limited to just 1.5 minutes to say something when we're bringing up that the official ballot for the county convention is flawed, and how they've contradicted their rules, and how Beaufort County particularly created additional rules that conflict with the state. And if you said something like normal like that, um, they'd gavel you really quickly, out of order, and then you'd be threatened with the risk of getting hauled off by an armed
Right.
security person.
And I mean, that should be a last resort too. I mean, unless if you feel like the people at the present at the convention that person's gonna be a harm to others or to hit his or herself, that's when he made that call to haul them off, not just for them to bring up something that you may or may not agree with.
Right. Well, and you have to go back. Sometimes history is just the best lesson, and go back even 50 years, to where what did America do and what kind of laws were in place that would keep, let's just say, communism out, because they really recognize that communism and subversiveness to the actual Constitution doesn't really coexist. And, you can't really just accept everything, even in the most civilized representative republic, you know, like we don't we can't agree that let's just say a theocracy like something in um Islam, where they believe in honor killing, right? And so a daughter dates somebody, and okay, you can, what are the remedies? And it's not like you ground the person, it's like extreme, right? And so that isn't something that's protected under freedom of religion, under our First Amendment right. You can't murder somebody, or like do something like slaughter little puppies or something. You know what I'm saying? And say, oh, that's my
Right.
religion. That's what I do. That's not protected First Amendment stuff. Um, and so communism in 50 years ago was considered a threat to our freedom, as it should be, right? And they very intentionally kept that out. And they did that by not putting up with it. So That's sort of where I feel like, um, they use words like subversion, but also things like, um, just the patterns of behavior of like an infiltration. And that's what I'm seeing is there's been an infiltration of the Republican Party. It doesn't look the same anymore. It doesn't feel the same. It doesn't act the same. And so it's kind of like if it looks like a duck and it acts like a duck, maybe it's a duck. Like maybe the Republican Party has embraced communism, right? And it's not even the
Right.
Republican Party anymore. So now we have to use like language that defines our reality. And that's where we really need to look at it. And I believe that it almost goes beyond subversion, arguably to sort of sedition, or um, just a real election interference. Because if you're rigging at that level where I was talking about, and then you're manipulating people who get to be delegates who are going to vote for somebody who's not just um, opposing on the other side of like some certain issues, is actively subverting election integrity, right? I mean, they want to keep the machines. They want to spend multi-million dollars in a budget to buy software from somewhere who knows where. Like we need to ask those questions, like where are you going to buy the software from? Where are you going to buy the hardware? And a lot of questions that people want to ask, but they just almost um, you know, shut down the idea of FOIA-ing these things from the South Carolina Election Commission is like, how much money do you spend on storage for these machines? How much money, where are they? How secure are these storage places? Are they at a normal temperature? What kind of temperature do you store these machines at? You see what I'm saying? There's a lot of questions that are just unknown, and I don't even think our politicians know to ask them.
Right. And one thing I was going to mention too is, this upcoming state convention, how do you think the matchup, what do you think is going to happen based on the matchup? I know for sure that Barbara Arthur is running against Drew McKissick. Have you heard of other candidates that decided to step into the play up to the plate?
There's some rumors of a guy. Oh gosh, I can't remember what his name is, and I have not been paying as much attention to that. I don't think that there's any real, um, major contender that's a big name, that I would say. Ken Moran might have thrown his name in. In my understanding, I mean, and Barbara Arthur even running. I mean, it's kind of like you could run, right? I mean, if because you're in the same probably standing position as Barbara Arthur, or somebody out of Charleston, or even me, right? I mean, my understanding is that I believe, and I wish her well, and I think everybody should try to do what they're called to do, but I always looked at that like it was sort of playing a tennis tournament, and you had to get through certain rounds to get up to the next level, and certain rounds to get up to the next level. Do you know what I'm saying? So I don't know what that looks like. I mean, I've heard Lee Bright's name get thrown around. I really like him. He was an amazing senator. I don't know if he's in the running. I don't know even if he's a delegate, but I like the idea of somebody like Lee Bright. I mean, do you know him?
I don't believe so. What area was he a senator for?
I think he's part of the upstate, like maybe Spartanburg area.
Okay.
Um, but it's going to be interesting to see. And I'd love to be a fly on the wall. Maybe you can get there under um, a media pass. Do you think you can get in and do a media pass to the state convention so you can keep us posted as to what happens in real time?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I called today and they responded with an email just saying for me to provide all the necessary information in order to get the media pass. So that was a good sign. They said it wasn't too late to register. So I hope I can get in and get and see what happens.
I hope you can too. And I do, I really think, I mean, anyone but Drew, really, if that's possible, I sure hope somebody is able to make that happen.
Right. And I've heard some good things like no Spartanburg County, they had a good turnout for the county convention. In Pickens County, for the most part, they did. They had a change in leadership, and based on their platform, I think they're going to try to turn things around and create the way it was, or at least reshape the way it was supposed to a couple of years ago. So that'll be good. So it'll be interesting to see, how many counties have flipped from establishment to America First, or at least that will vote for
Yes,
someone other than Drew McKissick. 'Cause it was pretty close last time. Jeff Davis, he came awfully close to beating Drew.
he sure did. I mean, he really did. I think people are just tired, and they see that they um, want to change. But the bottom line is that if they played completely on a fair playing field, we would have won already. We would have taken it over already. It'd be easy. But it's not. And I mean, I think Barbara Arthur, if you had her on your show, she would probably say the same thing, that she got completely shut out of her county convention. I don't even think she went to her county convention, did she?
I'm not sure, but I know I did see her post a few things on Facebook about how it wasn't really fair.
Right.
So
So, I mean, that's ultimately a problem. And then I saw her say that she wanted to try to get some help from Alan Wilson. This will segue us into the Alan Wilson topic, but good luck with that. That's why, don't hold your breath, Barbara, on trying to get some help from Alan Wilson. But anyway, at least I think he gave her some lip service at Horry County's convention. So
well, that's good. Yeah, I'm sure he's probably got a full schedule, especially if he's gonna be running for governor. I'm sure his email, his inboxes fill up all the time, and he gets phone calls all the time.
yeah, well, I'll tell you about Alan though. That's a prime example right there. What was he doing at the Horry County? And he was also in Charleston. And in Charleston, they even had Rand Paul because they were trying to compete with Greenville's Steve Bannon, right? And so at these county conventions, they're starting to have big name speakers, and ultimately, like I think Rand Paul spoke for a really long time, and like they didn't get to the county business, right? So it's like distract, 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 and then Alan Wilson's there promoting the establishment slate. And there you go. So you got these, and they want to keep it, but why are they doing it so hard, like never before? And I'm telling you, it's because they want to keep the machines. They want to keep gatekeeping all of the information from the county parties up to the state, and not be fiscally transparent, and not be fully accountable to their membership. That's what
Yeah,
my belief is.
yeah, and I know at least my district here in the upstate, they're doing their best to work on election integrity. I know we have Julie Baker and from Pickens County and Scott Gear from Greenville County. They're part of that committee, and I think they're doing an excellent job to at least bring back into election integrity. That way, people will have more faith in the voting, and we can increase the voter turnout. So I feel like that's why we really don't get the voter turnout that we really need to have, is that they just don't really have faith in the election process.
I think you're right. They don't think it matters. They really don't. And I think you're absolutely right. And I think that you're right. Those people you named are really amazing too. Julie's excellent. She's right on point. But the thing is too is Alan Wilson running for governor. I don't like that. I don't think that's great. He should not.
Okay. So another thing I was going to mention as well is I know that you did. Speaking of Alan Wilson, I know that you did run against him for Attorney General. With the election cycle coming up, next year in 2026, do you plan to run for something again?
No, no, not this election cycle. Maybe in 2028, but not 2026. But I can tell you, I don't think Alan Wilson will make a good governor. I think this diving board thing of becoming attorney general and staying there for 18 years and then going to become the governor isn't working well for our state. Henry is a good example, right? Henry was the attorney general for a while, and then lieutenant governor, and now governor. And we got a Republican, governor who is trying to appoint Dr. Simmer, right? Who's like Fauci light in South Carolina, to be the head of the South Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. That's a huge problem. So that's number one why Allen shouldn't go to become governor. And also, I just think he has so many problems with the fact that he took that $75 million for his previous private law firm and paid them that kind of a contingency fee in a case that was supposed to be settled for the plutonium cleanup in the nuclear power plant area, and just questionable things that he's done, questionable things that he did during COVID when he was promoting the vaccine, when he was promoting masks, when he wasn't really stopping the pornography in schools. I mean, you got to look at somebody who's going to be our next governor as somebody who's already done the work, who's like stood for these issues when it was hard to stand for the issues, not just like getting on the bandwagon because it's popular now. We need people who were there when it wasn't popular. Were there when they were standing up and, in the face of oppression potentially, and that's the next governor that we need for South Carolina. And so, and I'll have to tell you, Nancy Mace has done some stuff, and I've even called her out on some of the, language that she
Yeah.
continues to use, language that,
That's what I was
she
going to
didn't
ask you
create.
about. What's going on with Nancy Mace? I saw this past weekend about someone confronted her at Ulta, then also a transgender student from the University of South Carolina approached Nancy Mace. She definitely seems like she's been having a hard time here lately.
Well, is that when she was like tranny, tranny, tranny? She's just
Yeah,
yeah, and yeah. Well, look, here's another great executive order by President Trump, and it's like there's two genders. We went off the plantation and just have been. When I hear people say things like they're bringing litter boxes into schools for children to identify as like cats and furries and stuff, that's a mental health issue that like America needs to shore up pretty quickly. Like we can't put up with that. That's not we can't encourage that, I mean that's like serious mental health abnormal behavior, right? And that's a real assault on our people and our country and the strength of our country and the strength and resilience of our mental health. Um and so right, we have two genders. So this whole thing of I think, Nancy's right in that she is bringing to light the problem of like bathrooms and um these issues. I think at a YMCA, like not locally here in South Carolina but in another state, a girl and her mom and a bunch of people were swimming, and it was just like a big swim hour or whatever for young girls. And the moms, and they went into the locker room and they were just doing a quick change or whatever, and there was a dude in there straight up naked, you know and that's really not appropriate for young girls. And so I think Nancy's right, and somebody kind of has to bang the drum. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen Trump's Apprentice. I really never had until like recently, and I started watching it on Amazon Prime because it's there. um but one of the things is, he kind of likes that person, right? Omarosa in that first season was a little bit of a out there, controversial character, right? So I'm not saying Nancy Mace has turned into like the street theater congresswoman, but in a way she's kind of doing the street theater, right? I mean, she's bringing issues that are important that we talk about to light, in almost an extreme way. Does that make sense? Like I
it
personally wouldn't do
does.
that. I wouldn't use some of the language that she's been using. Um, all that whole thing. Um, but the also thing, I mean, it did go viral. I mean, that is like all over the place now. And, the guy didn't, they both looked, a little nuts in that situation. And of course, I think there's even a billboard now calling Nancy Mace out, like, Nancy, when are you going to have a town hall, right? And so, I mean, she's high. It's almost like you can't have it both ways. You can't go and slap the bull and not like be able to handle either running serpentine or what, you know what I mean, or just like take the red flag out and deal with it, right? She slapped the bull, and so
Right.
have a town hall, right? Just have a town hall, and get some armed guards there. I mean, I can give her the number of Shadan Lee and Kevin Henley, who are here at the Republican Party. They got great security. I mean, that's all you have to do, and maintain decorum and have a town hall and have some decorum. But that also, that was very she's had some issues, and that was very, I think, spontaneous, and just got a little the F bombs and all that. But um her reading the poetry that Fitz News put up, I just think you don't use the same words that necessarily people who are two wrongs don't make a right. So, I mean, I still go along with that, right? So, um, could it be handled differently? Sure. But I feel like those issues are somewhat of not totally superficial, but are not as important as what she's really saying about Alan Wilson and the guy who was the church Sunday school teacher who had child pornography, right? Have you seen that? And
I
he
believe so.
was arrested and then like out on bond right away. And she put up that like a mother who was behind in some guardian ad litem fees or attorney's fees that she owed opposing counsel in family court did time for 60 days or something like that. Um, and she's calling out Alan Wilson for the injustice of that, the injustice in the family court, the injustice in the court system, things that he's been made aware of for decades. And and she's right about those. There's some substantial issues that Nancy Mace is calling to light as well. I just hope they don't get like buried under the sort of street theater that's going on. But it's certainly interesting.
Yeah.
And I think she's right.
And
And I think
how do
uh,
you think she if she does throw her hat in the ring for governor, how do you think she has compares to her other opponents that she has?
you just don't know. It's going to be it's too early to tell. I think it's sort of like in a sporting event or something. There's too many unknowns that can occur, that could happen, and there's other people that can come in. Um, I feel like Nancy is on a mission right now to expose human trafficking, the border issues with illegals, fentanyl in our state. I mean, I think she's talking about that more than Alan is. What's Alan's platform really? Except for to copycat people and try to get on the popular bandwagon of what, Donald Trump's saying and act like at one point he said something that was so cringe. It was like he said he came down here to Bluffton and was speaking um, at one of the Republican meetings where they arrested this guy, Skip Hoagland. They actually arrested him because he used to be a member, but they thought he was going to disrupt the meeting. So they literally arrested him for trespassing. And Alan Wilson's walking in as this guy. You should get him on your show. He's got a story to tell for sure. But so, Skip got arrested and taken away to the Beaufort County Sheriff's, the Beaufort County Detention Center where for a trespass, they still strip search you and the whole thing. It's just a horrible experience, right? He's in his 70s. And that's what, that's not a good look for Alan Wilson. I'm sure Skip is like going to be campaigning against Alan Wilson because Alan's walking in as Skip's getting hauled off, the 70-year-old man, right, who was no threat to anybody, really. Um, and I don't even think that they have a trespass charge because in order to get a trespass charge, this shows you how they kind of like create things and manipulate it. The owner has to be the one that calls to get a trespass charge, and the owner of that facility, I don't think wanted to ever have Skip arrested. So it was Shouty and Lee, the same people that were running my county convention. So you want to know what Alan Wilson said at that particular meeting after he watched Skip going away um, in handcuffs, and he walked in, making sure that our streets are safe, right? That's Alan, making sure that justice is done. Um, he said Pam Bondi was his work wife, and like
Oh
everybody
wow.
cringed
Well,
on that.
so
Yeah,
they didn't really get a good response to that.
no, because people think one that was sort of like not very appropriate, and he was just trying to act like he has this inside track, you know and because he is the RAGA, Republican Attorney General Association president, I think he thinks he does have sort of an inside track. And I just believe that his arrogance is going to, trip him up at some point.
Yes.
I hope so because our state deserves better. Our state deserves somebody who is going to be looking at the corruption that we just talked about, the multi-million dollars that's going so many different places. And, you know, there's a couple of solicitors that I think are uh, passionate about prosecuting corruption. And that's what I hope we see somebody like that rise up who's going to be able to enforce the law and hold grand juries and prosecute the real criminals and not just get the low hanging fruit, which doesn't really, I mean, how many times has Alan Wilson said, "Oh, I did a human trafficking bust in Greenville," and they like got a few online sex predators, right? But
Right.
still, what's his budget for human trafficking? Over $50 million. Let's doge that. Let's let's SC doge that budget.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how the government and senator matchup is by the June primary. So,
Yeah.
is there anything else that you would like to say to our viewers here tonight?
Well, just stay involved, even though we're kind of like, oh my gosh, all these things that are going on. I mean, just stay involved. I think even one person can make a difference in whatever it might be that you're called to do, whether it's corruption within the judicial system that you see with guardian ad litem programs, with over expensive cases where people are just trying to visit their children, and it turns into thousands of dollars that they didn't have, where judges have become activists. If you see these things going on, I think the more America First type people, or just the more South Carolinians, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, where you see sort of an injustice, I think you just get involved. And I do think that that people need to use discernment. One of my favorite doctors that I know is a friend of mine too did a speech. There were four of the doctors in South Carolina that were going around, and they were talking about medical freedom, and they said, COVID's sort of behind us in the rear view, but there might be another issue that comes up, and there might be something that happens in the future. And these doctors just are such faith-based doctors too. And this is really what our country was founded on, was that part of the inalienable rights that don't come from government. And that gives us, one of the things that I really think that gives us is it's the Holy Spirit, and it gives us discernment. And so I think that was one of the great things that this doctor that he imparted to me through his speaking tour. And I'd like to impart to your viewers is just use your discernment. Each one of us is like, smart. We have common sense. I mean, our elected officials are not perfect, and they don't always know better or more than we do. And so I just feel like we should all take it upon ourselves to do our own research, realize that nobody really does come to save us. We have, a savior in Jesus Christ. Um, and, that's an individual, independent, free will choice. And not everybody, might agree with me with that. And that's okay too, because God, comes to different people at different times in their lives, and he gave us free will. So the government shouldn't be able to take away our free will. And that's the basic premise of our foundational government. And I just think that's what everybody has to remember. So that if we ever go into something similar to COVID, which I really hope that won't happen, but just that, if somebody's forcing you to wear a mask and you don't want to, and that's against everything that you believe, and against your benefiting your health or benefiting your mental health. I mean, think about, people forced to wear masks. Some of these kids got sick from it, you know, and it
Right.
affected their mental health. Like little babies that were wearing these masks, didn't speak as well. We've got all those issues. So we need to get up, we need to get activated, and we need to, connect with our neighbors, and just Matthew 28, we just need to just keep doing that. And I think if we do that, we win, because I mean, with Easter already, we're already victorious, so we should be happy people walking around joyous, even in the middle of like armed guards coming to get us. But I
Oh
think
yeah.
our republic is worth fighting for before it gets even more outrageous. And
Yeah.
if there's
Jesus
anyone who's
said,
watching right now,
I was just say Jesus, John the Baptist, and the Acts of the Apostles. I mean, they went against the less popular thing, but if they hadn't done what they had done, we wouldn't be able to, have the religion of Christianity that we have.
yeah, exactly right. And I mean, I even think, when people, like when I was doing my point of order and they, gavelled me off and the four guards started coming, the people in the audience thought, wow, sometimes when you get persecuted, it backfires. And and that's what happened. I mean, the Christians were willing to go and, you know, die if they needed to, and Curtis Loftus too. I think the South Carolina senators that overplayed their hands in the Senate, it is going to backfire so much on him. Curtis Loftus has the people um, behind him, and they see what a circus that was, and so I mean, is he perfect? No, I mean, but the way that that was handled was not due process, and so I do think that that our state is getting energized, and it's going to be your generation and even younger coming up that is going to have to really embrace it. And it's on my generation though to keep supporting you and encouraging you as you grow in your activism and your purpose, um, so that we can really keep this territory for our freedom and for the next generation to have freedom too.
That's right. Yeah, my advice to anyone that wants to put themselves out there, you will get persecuted, and not everyone's gonna like you. That's okay, because there will be people that will, and
Yeah,
to stand up for your belief and to try to serve in the best interest of your community and your constituents, and that's all that you can do.
absolutely. Well, and it's always fun, to be on your show. I'm really excited. I really hope that you get to go to the state convention. That's just what, in a couple weeks. So we'll see what happens there. I'll tell you, even if Drew wins, though, I mean, that's we still have to not stop, right? I mean, that's you don't sit around. They still need to be accountable to their membership, and we need to recognize that their agenda of keeping the machines is not something South Carolina should embrace.
Right, and it seems like, at least in the upstate, they're making good efforts on that. So computers definitely can be unreliable and can get hacked into. So we may see the paper ballots here eventually. Yeah. So but
Sounds
anyway,
good. Well,
yeah. Well, again, I enjoyed having you on my show. It's always good having you on, and I'll definitely let you know if I get that press pass for the state convention.
excellent. I'm so glad I didn't have any technical difficulties.
Yeah,
Yay.
we're able to get right through it, so that's good.
Yeah. Be
Yeah.
blessed.
Thank you. It was good talking with you. That concludes our show for this evening. If you have not already, please feel free to click, like, share, and subscribe on our YouTube channel for future updates, and also follow our Facebook page as well. I hope that everyone has had a great start to the work week and also had a good past Easter weekend. So, one thing that I'm going to start doing on my show is you probably have seen in other podcasts and also in local news networks, they try to share at least one good news story before they sign off. Because I feel like that's the really reason why a lot of people or some people steer away from watching the news is because a majority of it is negative and not positive. Well, here's one positive thing that happened earlier this month. So there was a waitress in the Pittsburgh area. She was in her early 80s, and she was still working that age because she could not afford to retire. But fortunately, their local esthetician and TikToker, her name is Tammy Kunzier. She is a regular at the restaurant that the waitress worked at, and Tammy was able to raise up to $300,000 to give to the waitress, so she was able to retire. So thank you, Tammy, for your donation. So it's good to see fellow podcasters and influencers out there do great things. So again, this is Mason Sims signing off. Good night to everybody, and God bless America. Thank you.